Can you imagine a station with 50,000 watts?
You can learn what makes David King tick by seeing everything he's collected.
This was one of the first cans Coca-Cola ever put out.
David says his grandfather could tell him stories about the old days, but couldn't show him anything from the old days. That bugged David so much it changed his life.
I just kept thinking through the years, I would love to preserve some of the items that I can put my hands on now, so my children and grandchildren could see exactly what you're talking about instead of letting me describe it.
So if something was old and nostalgic, David definitely collected it. If it was new and could be nostalgic one day in the future, David squirreled it away and waited.
It's just an instinct that you think about it. I mean, you just look at it and say, that, we need to preserve this because, one day this will be an antique. And just through the years, I've just put things up and been a pack rat.
David began restoring old cars in the 60s, and that's where his wife Jeannie says he started his hobby turned life's calling.
He had his dad's old truck, the '53 Ford, and I knew he liked old things, and actually I enjoyed old things, but I just never really saved a lot of things that I had.
The Kings retired to David's old family farm, and all the acreage in the country allowed him to do more than save vehicles. He built a private car museum, but then turned his attention towards old abandoned country houses other people told him they had no use for.
It was lived in, it has a history of its own, and it's a shame to see some of these older houses that have so much history behind them are destroyed.
The rickety houses were moved to David's farm, shored up, and stuffed with memorabilia. It looks like a village, and David calls it King's Crossing. David, when is enough enough?
I don't know. Sometimes I ask myself that question. When is enough is enough? You say, I'm not going to get anything else because I've got enough, and then all of a sudden you'll run across something, I got to have it.
He's just got good judgment on how much that he feels like that he can handle or spend or whatever, and he enjoys it, so, and I do too.
I went and talked to him and purchased it from him.
David seems to run across things all the time he wants to save, even when other people tell him that piece isn't worth keeping, it's not worth anything.
I don't understand some people who really doesn't care anything in the world about history or about old things. I guess a lot of people that grew up hard times years ago don't want to even think about the hard times, but you need to preserve those things. It was simple life. It was not as complicated. There was no cell phones ringing all the time. You could go out in the field or go out somewhere and go to work, and you were not bothered until you broke for lunch.
I know a lot of old folks that say today's the good old days.
The days are the good old days.
I got my satellite, my HVAC. Do we forget how hard it was?
We do. We really do. And the kids nowadays have no earthly idea how tough it was through those years.
David and Jeannie are preserving eras of 20th century America, from times when mules plowed fields and old men hung around country stores to when teenagers cruised the downtown square.
My favorite times is the 50s and the 60s.
Why?
Because I grew up in the 50s and 60s when things were simple, when the hot rods were going on, when everybody had the little souped up cars, that you could leave your car open and unlocked and go off with somebody and ride off to a movie or whatever and come back and nothing in the car was touched. Those were the precious days.
And David's artifacts represent precious memories. Now that he's retired, David is countering the faster pace of modern living through collecting things we busybodies overlook and don't think are very important now.
What makes it so hard? Do we not have time anymore?
No, a lot of people don't have time, and they're too busy. Their lifestyles are too fast. We're moving too fast. We got too many things to do to just take your time, sit back and enjoy some of our past and some of our present.
And the risk of being too fast with our lifestyle will mean what for us when we're older?
When you're older, you'll look back on it and wish I'd have took my time. I'd have spent a little bit more time, just like my grandfather spent time with me sitting there and talking to me.
Historical preservation, maybe you could call it memory preservation, is really David's new second career. He doesn't see a day coming when he'll not want to collect.